A storm came from Africa, led by a queen with a crown of war and a heart of fire. She rode through history like a blade through silk, swift, deadly, unforgettable. From the deserts of Kush, she emerged, fearless, merciless, unstoppable. Before we continue, subscribe. It helps us keep history's greatest stories alive. The sun rose over the Nile, casting golden light across the bustling city of Meroe. From these sands, a queen would rise, fearless, unyielding, and destined to challenge the might of an empire. Amanirenas, heir to the throne of Kush, grew in a land of ancient power, where kings and queens had ruled with both wisdom and war. The kingdom was rich, not just in gold and iron, but in culture, knowledge, and a spirit of independence that no foreign power could easily conquer. Her youth was shaped by stories of her ancestors, leaders who had defended Kush from invaders, who had made the desert and the Nile into natural fortresses. From the beginning, Amanirenas exhibited a courage that startled even the elders of her court. She trained tirelessly in the arts of strategy, horsemanship, and the use of weapons. Her mind was as sharp as her blade, and her presence commanded respect even among the fiercest warriors. The seeds of her legend were planted in these early years, watered by ambition and nurtured by an unyielding sense of duty. The world beyond Kush's borders was changing. Rome had begun to stretch its long arm into Africa, subjugating lands and peoples with a mixture of diplomacy and violence. The whispers of Roman conquest reached Meroe, and Amanirenas listened. She understood that Kush could not survive by fear or submission alone. To safeguard her people, she would need to be not just a queen, but a warrior, one whose courage could match the ambition of emperors. When she ascended to the throne, Amanirenas was already known for her daring and decisiveness. She moved quickly, consolidating power and earning the loyalty of her generals. Her vision was clear: Kush must remain free. She would not wait for Rome to test her resolve. Every decision, every campaign, was guided by a keen understanding of both her strengths and the weaknesses of her enemies. She studied the terrain, the movements of her neighbors, and the temperament of the Roman commanders who would dare to cross her path. Her first campaigns into Roman territories revealed the depth of her tactical genius. She struck swiftly, often using speed and surprise rather than brute force. Roman outposts were caught off guard, convoys were disrupted. Soldiers reported a queen who fought with both fury and intelligence. In battle, Amanirenas led from the front, her presence inspiring her troops and striking fear into her enemies. Stories spread quickly of a warrior queen who rode ahead of her men, shield raised, spear in hand, daring any man to challenge her. But strategy alone would not suffice. The Roman forces were vast and disciplined, armed with legions hardened by decades of conquest. Amanirenas relied on psychological warfare as much as combat. She used the terrain to her advantage, turning rivers, deserts, and forests into obstacles that slowed the enemy and amplified her own forces. Ambushes became her signature. No Roman commander could predict when or where she would strike. And with every victory, the legend of the queen who defied Rome grew, not just among her people, but even in the courts of the empire she challenged. The most audacious of her campaigns came when Amanirenas led an army deep into Egyptian territory, striking at Roman allies and capturing key forts. The logistical challenges were immense, moving men, supplies, and war elephants across deserts and river valleys required foresight and ingenuity. She ensured her soldiers were fed, her elephants maintained, and her plans executed with precision. Every victory was meticulously planned, every retreat deliberate, every strike calculated. Amanirenas was not reckless, she was relentless. When the Romans finally responded, they found themselves facing a force unlike any they had encountered. Kushite warriors, led by a queen who moved as swiftly as the desert wind, struck with unerring precision. The shock of facing a female commander only heightened the fear. Roman generals sent messages back to the Senate describing a leader who seemed everywhere at once, striking fast and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. They called her cunning, audacious, and unrelenting, and yet they underestimated her resolve. Amanirenas' victories continued to mount. She captured cities, disrupted supply lines, and forced Roman garrisons to retreat. But she was not driven by conquest alone. Her goal was the survival of Kush and the independence of her people. Every campaign, every raid, was an assertion of sovereignty. Her soldiers fought not merely for gold or glory, but for the queen who led them fearlessly into the storm. Rumors spread across the Nile and into Roman territories, a queen who could defeat Rome itself. In the shadow of these victories, Amanirenas prepared for her boldest move and assault into the heart of Roman-controlled lands along the Nile. The operation required careful coordination, stealth, and courage. She moved her troops under the cover of night, navigating rivers and desert paths, avoiding detection while leaving a trail of psychological pressure on the Romans. Her leadership was absolute, her presence a beacon of strength. Each step of the campaign demonstrated her understanding of both warfare and human nature. Rome's soldiers were disciplined, but fear was universal. The climax of Part 1 comes as her forces engage the Romans in a decisive battle. The Kushite army, guided by Amanirenas' strategy, encircles a Roman fort, cutting off reinforcements. The queen herself rides at the front, inspiring her troops with courage and determination. By the battle's end, the Romans are forced to withdraw, humiliated and shaken. Kush has struck a powerful blow, asserting its strength in the face of one of history's greatest empires. Rome had underestimated her, but Amanirenas was just beginning her storm. More than a century has passed since Amanirenas first rode into history, yet the echoes of her victories remain vivid. The Roman Senate could scarcely believe reports of a queen who had challenged their legions and forced them into retreat. Inscriptions and letters spoke of her audacity, her tactical genius, and the fear she inspired. Every campaign she waged reinforced a singular truth. Kush would not bow, and no empire, however mighty, could dictate the fate of her people without consequence. As Rome regrouped, Amanirenas did not falter. She anticipated their countermoves, striking at weak points, harrying supply lines, and leveraging intelligence gathered from local allies. Her army moved with precision, her elephants and cavalry forming a force that combined both shock and mobility. Roman soldiers whispered her name with apprehension, recounting encounters where the queen seemed to vanish like smoke after a strike, leaving confusion and panic in her wake. She transformed warfare into art. Every ambush, every feint, every calculated withdrawal was executed with an understanding of human psychology as keen as her grasp of strategy. One of her most renowned confrontations came when she pressed into Roman-held territories along the Nile. The Romans had constructed forts and stationed legions to assert control, confident in their superior numbers and armor. Amanirenas, however, exploited the environment with masterful insight. River crossings were transformed into traps, desert passages into corridors of ambush. She understood the terrain as intimately as the Romans understood discipline, and she leveraged it to her advantage. Entire garrisons found themselves encircled, outmaneuvered, and humiliated. The psychological toll on Rome was profound. The commanders could not comprehend how a queen had outwitted them at every turn. Fear began to permeate their ranks. Whispers of her invincibility spread beyond the battlefield into the Senate and the cities of the empire. Amanirenas' reputation grew not just as a warrior, but as a symbol, a living embodiment of resistance, courage, and the refusal to submit. Letters from Roman officers describe seeing her ride into the fray, spear in hand, eyes blazing with resolve, and feeling the certainty of defeat before the battle even began. Yet, for all her brilliance, Amanirenas was not reckless. Every decision was measured, every campaign carefully calculated to protect her kingdom's longevity. She understood the limitations of her forces and the endurance of her people. Her diplomacy mirrored her battlefield strategy, firm, clear, and unyielding. Even as she struck fear into Roman hearts, she negotiated when necessary, ensuring that Kush could maintain its independence without unnecessary sacrifice. These delicate maneuvers, combining war and negotiation, marked her as not merely a warrior queen, but a sovereign whose vision extended far beyond conquest. The culmination of her campaigns left an indelible mark. Roman forces, battered and demoralized, had to recognize the futility of continued aggression. Kush's sovereignty remained intact, its people safe, and its queen immortalized in both legend and history. Amanirena's victories were not simply tactical, they were symbolic. She demonstrated that courage, intelligence, and leadership could challenge the mightiest empires and emerge victorious. Every village, every fortress, every battlefield echoed her presence long after the dust settled. Her final years were marked by a blend of vigilance and reflection. Amanirenas continued to govern Kush, ensuring that the kingdom remained prosperous and fortified. She invested in the welfare of her people, overseeing trade, agriculture, and the strengthening of her army. Her experiences in battle had not hardened her to compassion. Rather, they informed her understanding of the costs of war and the value of foresight. She became both a guardian and a symbol, a queen whose life exemplified resilience, strategy, and the relentless pursuit of freedom. Legends grew around her exploits. Stories told of her rides through the desert with elephants thundering beneath the sun, of her cunning that outwitted Roman generals, and of her voice that could command armies without uttering a threat. Artists and storytellers immortalized her in carvings and songs, ensuring that her story would endure long after the sands of time had buried her footsteps. Even distant empires came to respect Kush not solely for its wealth, but for the queen who had faced Rome and emerged undefeated. When Amanirenas passed, her death was met with mourning and reverence. She had lived a life of audacity, intelligence, and unwavering courage. Her people remembered a queen who had defied the impossible and whose legacy was etched into the very identity of Kush. Rome, too, remembered her, not with hatred, but with a grudging acknowledgement of the woman who had forced them to confront their limits. In every account, in every whisper of history, Amanirenas stood as a reminder that power is not defined by size or number, but by vision, strategy, and unyielding resolve. Centuries later, historians and scholars study her campaigns with awe. Military academies dissect her strategies. Political theorists analyze her diplomacy. She is cited not merely as a historical figure, but as a paradigm of leadership, courage, and resistance against overwhelming odds. Her story continues to resonate because it speaks to universal truths: the potency of intellect over force, the impact of bravery against tyranny, and the capacity of one person to alter the course of history. She rode through fire, challenged an empire, and carved her name into eternity. Amanirenas, the queen who refused to bow to Rome, remains a figure of awe, her legacy alive in the courage of those who dare to defy the impossible. And in the silent deserts and along the Nile, one can almost hear the echo of her elephant's march, a reminder that history remembers those who refuse to be conquered. I know you enjoyed this story. Please support this channel by liking this video and also hitting the subscribe button. Also, do well to check out on other interesting videos from this channel. Thank you.